Hi, folks. If you've just joined, we're about to start the webinar very soon. So people are dropping in at the moment, and we'll be starting in a few minutes. For those who just tuned in, the webinar is going live soon on exploring the employee journey mapping exercise. So we'll be starting in a few minutes. So we have people dialing in from all over the world. I'm actually in Australia. The sun has just come up here. We've got folks in Europe where the sun is setting very soon, and folks in the US. I'm sure you're all, dialing in from all over the world. If you've just dialed in, the webinar is going to start very soon. And we'll be exploring the employee journey mapping exercise together. So stay tuned. We'll be starting very soon. If you're in chat, let us know where you're dialing in from as well. It's always fun to see folks dropping in from all over the world. Mostly in the US at the moment, I see. Felicitas, we're in a minority here in Europe and Australia.
Yeah, I mean, this is pretty much aperitivo time in Southern Europe.
Exactly, yeah.
It's very good to be here. Hey, everyone.
So we're starting in approximately, 2-3 minutes or so. Hi, Julie. How are you? I just saw an old colleague of mine dialing in. That's fantastic. So a few more minutes to wait. Hi, Abby Brennan. It's exciting to see you. It's fun to see familiar names on chat.
That means you have a fan base, Joris.
Well, fan base, I just contact a lot of people. I don't know if that's, maybe stalking or whatever it's called, or just a longish career in HR. For those who just signed in, folks are dropping in at the moment. We'll be starting the webinar soon. The webinar on exploring journey mapping. So if you just arrived, welcome. We're about to start in a minute. Great. Cool. We're about to start right now. Everyone, a warm welcome. As I said, I'm dialing in the morning here in Australia, 6 a.m. First thing we're doing is a webinar, and we've got folks from all over the world dialing in. I must say, I'm a little bit overwhelmed with the number of registrations, and very pleased with the number of registrations that we received. And it just kind of kept building and building and building. Literally hundreds and hundreds of you have registered, submitted questions. And today what we're doing is trying to answer as many of your questions as possible. Obviously, we won't go through all of them. It's virtually impossible. But we'll tap on the most important questions. Now, the way we're trying to do that is we'll try to answer the bigger questions around journey mapping first, which provides a little bit of context as well on what journey mapping is. Then we'll dive into a number of rapid questions, and the rapid questions go as follows. I pop up the question and we'll try to answer it as quickly as possible in a minute or less, just to provide as much information to this group, to the audience, to you registrants as possible. And then we'll dive into additional questions that you will ask throughout the webinar. So very much encouraged, if you have a question popping up, feel free to pick it up. We've got Lexi on the call as well from PIN, who will pick up these questions and is able to resubmit them towards the end of this webinar. So please use chat to submit questions throughout the webinar as we go. And then at the end, we'll talk about some takeaway materials that you will get after this webinar. Now, you can use the Q&A function to ask questions. You can obviously chat with panelists and attendees using the chat feature. And you can enable captions as well as you want. Click on more and enable live transcripts at the bottom. And you can just do that within Zoom. So without further ado, I want to jump in after this admin stuff and warmly introducing you to the panel. I'm incredibly excited about this group of people just because of the differences in backgrounds that this group brings. I'll quickly introduce all of you, and then we'll go into the first questions. And if you want to provide more context, John, Felicitas, and Remy, you'll be more than happy to do so. But I'll just run through it quickly. We have John on the call. John is a 4-time CPO, and now the founder of Gamut Labs. An incredible wide level of experience in different roles. Ran people at IDEO, at Hulu, at TrueCar, at TruePill, and has gone through the exercise of creating journey maps multiple times. So someone who's actually been in the mud, done it, made mistakes, got through to a really good outcome as well, and just has a really good experience in this area. And then Felicitas, who is the VP of People at parcelLab. Felicitas has been, kind of diving into this more recently with her team. So super excited for you to be here, Felicitas, as well, to share your experiences. And Remy Bleijendaal, Chief People Officer at Data AI, and prior to that actually led products. So really has this beautiful product angle going into this webinar as well. And before that, in the prior life, worked at ABN AMRO. Is a fellow Dutch person, so I can actually pronounce your surname Bleijendaal well, I hope. And myself, I am Joris. I'm the founder of PIN, but before I was a practitioner and tried to create these maps myself as well. I used to run HR at Atlassian for many, many years. Then I moved to Squarespace, Typeform, before founding PIN. And PIN is a employee communications and experience platform. I'll dive into it a little bit more towards the end of the session as well. But basically, what we're trying to do is just provide people with useful and helpful information throughout their employee journey. And with people, I mean employees. So just one slide on context and some examples of what a journey map actually looks like, just to set the scene a little bit. Now, what is an employee journey? Many of you will already be familiar with it, but just to kind of have a shared common language here for the webinar, an employee journey is all the moments that matter across the employee journey. Now, throughout that employee journey, from onboarding all the way through to exit, there's many moments that are truly important for people to get the right levels of support and guidance in order for them to get through those moments well and confident and all of that stuff. Now, what is then the employee journey map? The map defines and prioritizes the work that needs to be done to make sure that the employee experience, so those moments that matter, are indeed top-notch. Now, the great thing about many of these moments is that they're predictable moments for an employee. We already know that they're going to happen. We know if a person is coming back from parental leave, they need guidance and support, and the manager needs to put together a return to work plan, right? We know if a person becomes a manager, they need information on how to have a kickoff one-on-one with their new direct reports, right? We know this stuff, right? But it's very hard for us in HR to be there for those people at those times. So that is what an employee journey map sets out to do, to kind of outline, to visualize all of those moments that matter throughout the journey of an employee. Now, I wanted to start with providing a little bit of context by showing some visualizations, so people understand what a journey map could look like. And I'll start with the journey map that John has put together. And John, I'll get you to jump in and provide a little bit more context there as well. That I found was just...
Before we move on, sorry. Hey, everyone. I'm Lexi. I'm the disembodied voice from chat. I'd love if we launched our first poll here to see who from our attendees has created their own employee journey map before. So I'm going to launch that poll really quickly, and we'll see what the audience says.
So I'll give you 10 seconds to answer this question. I'm very curious actually what comes out of that.
I gave him 20 seconds.
Thank you.
All right, so we're ending the poll there, and I'll share the results. So we had 76% of attendees respond, and 71% of attendees have not created an employee journey map. 21% did create one, but did not successfully use it. And 8% did create one and successfully used it.
Wow, so a lot of people, are yet to create their first journey map. And I think, what I found fascinating is when I spoke with John many months ago, you mentioned, John, like this is one of the most defining things for you, and you wouldn't be able to run a people operations effectively without this journey map. So maybe provide a little bit of context as well there as I'm diving into the actual map. So the map, just conceptually for folks to understand, you're looking at a number of employee journey stages, things like onboarding or manager development. As part of that, there's key moments that happen during those stages of a journey. Like in the onboarding stage, you may have your first day, right? Or, you're at the end of probation, that type of stuff. And then, of course, there's supporting communications that you want to send to the employee or to that person's manager or other stakeholders in the organization to help a person through those key moments. Now, a great example, and this may be a little bit overwhelming to see at first, but if you zoom into one of the areas, you can kind of get a little bit of a glimpse of the detail involved in this. Was put together by John. John, I'd love for you to kind of share a tiny bit of information on what people are looking at here, if you could.
Certainly, and I just want to underscore that this is, I was saying earlier in our team, I've done this about 20 times. This is 1 out of 20 that actually looks this good. Most of the time, it's barely more than a whiteboard. Oftentimes, it's an Excel spreadsheet, and so there's stuff we can talk about as we get down. But so don't be intimidated by the fact that this looks like it's all fancy. What's important to look at is the left to right sequence of steps that an employee goes through. That's the main thing. They're the ones in the green box. So you identify various different spots along their experience with the company, and you can call them whatever you want. But then for each one of those spots, there are supporting documents. There are other people who touch that moment that we call stakeholders. There's technology. And then there's all these colored dots on there that are showing different rankings that we did to find out which things are working fine, which things are not working, which things are long-term versus short-term. So we were able to look at everything on here and then start prioritizing what we want to do.
And it's just a beautiful visualization, as you say. But what I find really interesting is that in a glimpse, you can see, okay, what are some of these priorities that we want to tackle first in terms of improving the employee experience, right? So I think that was it must have been a really, really valuable exercise. Just to, as you started, I presume you didn't start with a beautiful diagramming tool. You probably started did you start with using a whiteboard?
It was a whiteboard and Post-its, many sessions. This took, months and months to create with lots of different people. So it wasn't one person sitting down and saying, okay, I'm going to draw this. It was conversation after conversation amongst my team members, amongst managers who were involved in the process, our IT, partners. One thing I didn't mention before is what drives this, what makes employee journey maps work really well is the empathy of their emotional state. That's a new feature that a lot of us don't talk about, but it's in here as well, those little circles. And then also it shows what's going on behind the scenes as well as what the employee might actually touch. So above the line are things they would experience, below the line are things they don't even know are happening. And then way down there at the bottom, the lines that go along are the different technologies we use at each step. So you can see where there's overlaps of different software platforms that need to work together. So the whole idea is just to get everything possible you can think about that might affect that moment and make sure you've at least noticed it. And you like truly, you just throw it up on a wall and eventually you find use in the patterns and zero in on things.
And one of the things that, like you mentioned, John, is like it took a long time to kind of get started. Hence the reason why we actually open sourced a journey map as well. So if people have a something to look at early on. Now, obviously, this is a very long map and it continues actually to the right. Obviously, on a screen, it looks a little bit better because you can just literally scroll through it. But zooming in on a part there, you can see the parts very similar to John's model, probably not as pretty, where you see the parts of the journey, the moments that occur, and then the supporting communications in order to help a person through it. So in this example here that I kind of highlight, if you have parental, like a person coming back from parental leave, the person, their manager needs to put together a return to work plan. Now, obviously the manager needs to know how to put together a return to work plan. So it would be ideal if you can automatically identify a person coming back from parental leave and supply that manager with instructions on how to do that. So we've created this. It's a open source Figma. We will send that to you after this webinar as well. So you don't have to kind of reinvent the wheel, sort of say. It's an incredible helpful tool for our team as well on how to structure the entire employee journey. So we know that we don't lose out on any of these steps. So diving into everyone's questions. So this was the context that we provided. If we, again, we'll be able to present like the recording back so you can re-look back at the visualizations and provide some more tooling around that. But we're going to dive into some bigger questions first. And we'll start with Felicitas. Welcome again. And the first big question that we wanted to get answered is, how do you even get started, right?
This is the most beautiful question. Yes, thanks so much, Joris. That's a fabulous question. And just to everyone, just because I saw the poll, 71 people or 71% haven't done it before. Don't get intimidated by John's expert map. It's extremely beautiful. I started last year in summer with my team at a team workshop. And how did we get started? So we have people from all across the world here dialing in, which is amazing. And I would assume there's some people who have done traveling before. And it's literally more or less you can start it in the same way. So if you want to travel to Italy or California or say Australia, you want to make it an amazing trip. And you will map down which museum you want to see, where you get the best ice cream, or if you want to go diving somewhere. And this is the same you would do for an employee journey map. The journey of an employee starts somewhere and it ends somewhere. And how we started with my team, we mapped the bigger areas that all of my team members are responsible for. So when we called them stages. So that is, for instance, the talent acquisition process, the onboarding process, when people start to become a little bit more engaged in the organization, or at one day, obviously also the exit process, how that would then look. And all those different stages are filled with countless moments that your team, or maybe yourself, that really depends on if you are part of a smaller organization where you might even be the only HR person that is responsible for the entire, for creating a very unique experience true to your organization, or even if you're part of a larger team. But the important part is that you get everybody involved in the experience together and you map the individual moments that you're creating. That can be the first interview, the offer letter, the promotion, an employee anniversary, literally anything that comes to your mind where you and your team might be involved that contributes to the employee journey. And we had a whiteboard. I wrote actually an article about it. You can see the photos. It's a whiteboard, tons of Post-its. It's clustered and very convoluted in some spaces. it doesn't look very structured at the beginning, but the process in and of itself is so beautiful because you gain insights. And that's why I can highly recommend going through the exercise, trying it yourself. And it's a beautiful experience for the team, and then also how to use it later on.
Great, thank you. A little bit of overlap here. Obviously, where to start, the first steps to create, but then also, some of these KPIs and, how does that, what do you work towards and what kind of measurements do you work towards? And that second question was for Remy. Remy, if you'd love to answer that.
Yeah, thank you, Joris. I love what Felicitas just shared, and those steps that she shared just make total sense. I think on top of that, I think what would be really worthwhile to consider is also to make sure that you've established a strong cultural framework, that you have strong cultural values defined with operating principles, and that you also have thought about what kind of employee value proposition you're offering. A lot of companies don't do that, and it's not aligned with either the E team or within the HR team, and it can cause a lot of confusion. I think it will, if you really define that, it will really impact identifying the moments that matter for you as an organization, and how to create those moments that matter, how to word it in the supporting communication material, and make sure that that value proposition consistently and continuously comes through. For instance, at Data AI, we have aligned at the E-team level that our value proposition consists of 4 components. We have a bold company vision that we provide. We have high-performing teams. So you're going to be part of a high-performing team. We're going to offer you growth, both personally and professionally. And we're going to offer you a global environment. We offer access to 1,500 plus enterprise customers and employees in 14 different countries. And one of those components under that one, under the global environment, was to keep politics out of the door, to avoid internal division and any distraction from our core mission. Now, as you can imagine, if you're really clear about that, that immediately rules out certain moments that matter and how you talk about certain things in your communication. And I think that's really important to do as well. I think it also really is important to do this so that you, during the recruiting phase, you're very clear about what it is that you're offering, so that you get the right people on the bus. And you do not get confusion later down the road on the during the employee journey. And I think finally, it also provides way more clarity to the HR team that in the end needs to create all of these moments that matter, because it's one collaborative effort, and they know what is it that we're trying to create here. What is in the end the value proposition that we're offering to our folks? So with that, let me switch on to the KPIs. I think there's probably two angles. One angle is making sure that you really cover all of these moments. So if you track your progress, like, are we already consistently hitting those moments that matter consistently and for all employees? That will really measure your progress on the project. But I think just as important, and maybe even more importantly, is actually measuring the outcomes. Like, are you actually making impact? And I think you can do that during the recruiting phase by measuring time to hire, which basically measures your internal efficiency of getting candidates through the pipeline. Candidate experience through a survey or time to fill. And then during the employee lifecycle, measure the 90-day effectiveness. Like, ask them how happy they are after 90 days doing the onboarding. Was the onboarding effective? How happy are they? Did we actually sell them the role that they wanted? And are we actually really providing them the role that we sold them and the employee value proposition that we told them that we would give them? And then, of course, you can measure ESAT through surveys or regrettable attrition. So right. I think that would be a couple of ideas and a couple of KPIs that I think you should focus on.
And what I find fascinating about the concept of, like, measuring these things like a sentiment afterwards through surveys and results, is a bit more of a lagging indicator, right? So this is the outcome of the process. If you ask a person, hey, what was your onboarding experience like? If it's gone wrong, then the results will show that. The coverage that you mentioned is really a leading indicator, right? So how many of these moments do we cover in a consistent way? So you can build towards having a really great onboarding process by touching all those moments. Really nice leading indicator. And those work really well together, right? My co-founder, John Williams, used to be a co-founder at CultureAmp. And obviously they measure a lot of the sentiment data afterwards, right? So they measure employee engagement, which kind of covers the entire employee journey, or they have an onboarding survey, which is great as a lagging indicator, and a leading indicator is more around how many of these moments do you cover. So switching to
it's probably important to measure both. And also I would recommend baseline it before you go on the journey, so that you can actually see like, where are we today? Where are we? And then measure actually like, did we actually make an impact afterwards? And also it will give you some focus on where to focus on first, because it's very easy to get trapped in like a lot of different things. Like, and where do we begin? Begin with the things that are most broken.
Yeah. So it gives you a nice sense of progress as well for the team, right? Like progress is so nice, and it's actually very hard sometimes in HR to measure progress.
Or to sell it outside to the rest of the organization. Like, are we actually making progress? Are we making business impact?
So John, like Remy mentioned, like stakeholders outside the team. The next big question is like, how do we get like other stakeholders on board? And what is the best way to explain the outcomes to managers so they can take actions as a result of journey mapping?
Yes, it's great. And I'm just going to keep building on some of the things that we've all said, because this is continuing to be sort of a cumulative kind of an additive type of a conversation. So I'll mention some metrics here as we go along as well, because kind of, the way to get started, as Felicitas said, is that big whiteboard with Post-its, and it's a mess. But if you're going to bring stakeholders in, you have to clean it up a bit. And so what forces me into various versions are the various different partners or stakeholders that are involved. And just for a high level, stakeholder could be the user themselves are kind of a stakeholder. They're the employee going through the journey. But for the sake of this word stakeholder, we're going to talk about all the other people that the journey map can help. So for example, within my HR team, you've got people on talent acquisition, you've got people in HR ops that are doing onboarding, you've got a business partner who might be doing some coaching. All of the different elements of your HR team are stakeholders, and oftentimes they are disconnected from each other based on the software they're using and the silos they're in. So immediately what I like to do when I'm working with an HR team is get my whole team together and show them how we all share parts of the journey. And I use it as a motivating device to get us all playing together versus separate, because there's nothing more annoying to me as a leader than to have people passing things over a fence as if somebody on the other side, they didn't know what was happening next. So we get to build empathy for the user right off the bat by just getting the whole team to see the whole journey. It's especially helpful for more junior members who've never seen the whole journey and don't even know what all these other parts are. And we can talk about that more if you want down the line, but it's a great staff development tool. The next stakeholders that I get involved are people from IT or finance, payroll, all the folks that are outside of my purview in terms of supervision, but are touching this experience and critical to having it happen. And so by bringing a section of the map with me to a meeting, I can show how we're both touching the same moment at the same time, and we're together on a team trying to help that moment happen. And then you can throw it to the next level, which is hiring managers or supervising managers. Oftentimes they're feeling like they're left out of the discussion, or they're out of the loop because they're not themselves focusing on this all the time. And so to see where they play a part and how they're part of a team for the journey is really an interesting process. I do some management workshops where I'll do the high level with this. And then finally, just to keep it as simple as possible, sort of executive sponsorship. When we're going to the CFO or the CEO or a COO to get budget or to talk about annual spending or annual projects, I use a map like this to help them understand where and why we want to do the things we want to do and how they fit together. So it's, I guess to summarize the stakeholder conversation, it's about a prototype of something that sometimes only 1 or 2 people in HR even know exists, which is this whole journey. And we had a saying at IDEO that you never attend a meeting without a prototype, because we all know that everybody has their own vision of what they think is that you're talking about. And when you can put it up graphically and show it, it's a lot easier for people to realize that they have a misconception or a different conception than you do, and you can come to terms quicker. So that's kind of what that's for. And then in terms of getting managers on board, the best way I can ever explain this is to actually have a journey mapping session with them. So they're collaborators in building this thing. I do find that there are versions of it that are better for different stakeholders. So this thing you saw earlier was seen by very few people. It's like the specifications of building a house. Only a few people really know all the details of all the different maps. But if you've ever seen someone build a house, they've got a plumbing plan, an electrical plan, a roofing plan, a framing plan. All the different parts are broken out so that that particular element is really obvious to the people that are working on it. So I tend to use the elements that matter the most with that particular stakeholder group and keep it very clean and simple without all the detailing. That's really for the inside view for our team to look at. So because we're the ones actually putting all the little things together. So I'll stop there. Just, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. What I like about it is in HR, especially traditional HR teams, the Jorik model, right? These different pillars of HR teams with learning and development, the office experience, recruiting, people ops, all having different parts of that journey without an understanding and appreciation of what an experience of an employee is. Has been very detrimental, I think, to our success in HR.
And strangely, a lot of times people compete over early in my career, I worked at a financial services company where our learning and development people were sort of in competition with the business partners over who was going to be the one to talk about whatever with the supervising managers. And it was this most ridiculous kind of waste of energy around. So this
absolutely. Yeah. And also just to go to your leadership team and say, hey, look, because HR is so reactive, right? Like from experience, right? And, your management team or your CEO may come to you saying, we have to do X, we have to do management training right? And to be able to say, well, this is what we're working on, it's very hard for, if you ask any HR person, what is your strategy? Super hard to answer that question, right? With the journey map, suddenly you have a strategy and you have priorities and you have, you weigh one initiative against the other because, and it becomes very much, it becomes more visual and the CEO and anyone in the management and any stakeholder can understand. I want to move over to our rapid questions just to stick with time. Quick answers to these questions. We're going to just drive through them quickly to answer as many questions as possible. We'll start with you, John. Why should you even develop a journey map, and what are the outcomes that it does deliver? Very briefly.
Well, I've covered a couple of them, so I'm going to add one more, which ties together some of the stuff that Remy mentioned, which is it helps you decide what to work on and what's going to have the most impact. And what I mean by that is, if you have a value proposition, you need to have a hypothesis of which 5 things or 7 things that we deliver. If we can measure that we're going to actually do them like a learning and like a leading indicator. Did we execute onboarding? Did we have the one-on-one for the performance discussion? Did we have a recognition thing? Did we give a proper evaluation? There should be maybe a handful of those that are your hypothesis that if we deliver on those things, we're going to have a bigger impact. And I think that's the most important thing the journey map leads you to, is selecting across all those things, which are the 4 or 5 we're going to use and how are they going to add up to a good outcome.
Great. Felicitas,
Awesome.
You just went through the exercise. How did you involve your team?
Exactly. So the important thing is to involve your team. Don't do this alone. Never, ever. Bring the people who are working with you in your team, involve them. They are the creators of the map. If you have a map or not, they are delivering on moments. They are creating moments. Maybe some moments you don't even know they're working on. I found it the most simple to bring people into a virtual room or an in-person room, whatever room you have, bring them together in a small workshop. Doesn't have to be long, can be 60, 90 minutes to get started. And people just list the moments they work on in their day-to-day. They send out a contract. They create a manager coaching session. They, I don't know, send some flowers for an employee anniversary, whatever it might be. The important part is to bring them in. I think a workshop is a good way to also have a conversation about those moments and understanding a little bit more. And if you have to be super efficient, you can obviously do this async in whichever tool you like collecting those moments.
Great. Remy, this is a really tough one. Like, we have hundreds of different jobs and tens of different business units in our organization. How does that impact the employee journey mapping process? And I think all of us on the panel have probably struggled with that a little bit. Any advice there?
Yeah, I would just start small, like start small and create a generic employee journey map. Like there is a lot of employee moments that matter to all the employees. Like if you just heard what Felicitas and John were just talking about, those are things that happen to every employee. Start there. Otherwise, I think it can easily get way too overwhelming. And then you do not get started. You actually get a delay. So instead of like going for something perfect, start with something small, get going. And then later, when you got the generic employee journey map in place, I think, and you got that running and you start actually creating real coverage there, I think that's when the moment where you start to like look into, for instance, okay, we now need to go specific into managers, for instance, or we go into different business units or different functions or role specific moments.
Very, very good advice. And I think a lot of folks who start with this, and a lot of PIN customers started with this as well, a generic process, and then they layered on every time a little bit of personalization for a specific demographic, right? And it's so much easier to manage it that way. So it's great advice. So John, how do you bring cross-functional teams together at different parts of the map to ensure a seamless experience? You alluded to this a little bit before, but how does it actually work in practice?
Well, once you have sort of your core steps, and this is related to Neil's question as well, is like, yes, there could be a million moments on here, but it's also easy to zoom out a bit and pick the big ones like offer, first day, like there are some big steps that everybody takes. So on those big steps, you can take just that step and go to your cross-functional meeting and say, when we do this step on the first day of an employee's experience, what are all the things you're working on that you feel the employee should know about? And so I've done that with finance. I've done that with IT. They all have their own list and checklists. Sometimes they have their own forms, and trying to have an employee fill out 12 different forms on the first day is a bad experience if you look at it from the employee's perspective. And so we come together and say, okay, what's the way we could make this better for the employee, not better for us? I know you need to get that information. I know you have to execute a bunch of things. How can we put it together into a set so that the employee could experience it all at once? Just as simple as that. And then people either resist and you have to tackle them. No, I'm kidding. They usually just go, oh yeah, I get it, I see. And then sometimes you get bogged down in the tool. Like, how are we going to figure out how to bring this together in one tool? But that's usually you can overcome that pretty easily.
Right. Remy, another question for you. Some folks are interested in how to see how this can be tied in or enhanced through technology.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I think it's actually really hard to pull off without technology. This is also free commercial for you, Joris, but this is one of the reasons why we actually connected to a company like PIN and to a solution, because this is without automation, this is extremely hard to pull off. When we started to create this journey map with the team, the people partners and people ops, we could immediately see like, oh, our experience is very different depending on which recruiter you talk to, or which in which region you're getting onboarded, in which country you're getting onboarded. And I think tools like CRM systems like Phenom that we use are a must to eventually create that consistent recruiting experience, or tools like PIN to create that central nervous system almost of managing that employee experience. I think that could be the future for a company like PIN. I think it will also get really excited what's upcoming, I think, in this area. I think there's a lot in HR technology where we're behind. If you look at what's already out there on Marketo, on the marketing side, or where Salesforce is going, like, look at it from that angle. All those developments that are going on there are coming to go here. Like, we're now talking about a very generic and employee journey map. The next layer is like, we're going to a little bit more role-based, but I think in the end, we're going to start to measure way more. We're sitting on tons of data in the organization that we're not leveraging. And if you start to tap into that, you can actually start to measure the health of the employee. And based on that, start to predict, like, what's the mental state? Is this person potentially going to leave the organization? Is this person ready for a new challenge? And do we need to actually start to prioritize certain messages that needs to go out either to the people partner to take action on this employee on a very personalized way instead of the generic way? And I think eventually it will start to prescribe actions. Or predict certain outcomes, or prescribe actions to the people partner on what to do, or to the people, or to the manager on what to do with a certain employee.
And it's interesting, the connection between, like, what marketing has been doing for years, right? Like the customer journey, following a person from being a prospect, acting in a certain way on Facebook,
Exactly.
looking at certain pages, looking at your website, and advertisers sending communications based on that vast amount of data. Now, I think that's a little bit creepy in that area, to be honest, but from an employee perspective, it's not. And actually it's very helpful, right? A person moving countries or teams, or that's data that just sits there latent.
Yeah. How often are we doing the exit interview? Do you hear things as a people partner that you feel like, we could have avoided so many things?
Exactly.
Like, this was such a loss. Like, we could have actually offered somebody that they're going to do another role, and the manager and we didn't even know it. And we could have actually provided that opportunity inside the company. Like, these small things, we're not leveraging the data that we're sitting on, and we could improve the employee experience way further. I think it's going to be the future.
Felicitas, over to you. Is there, again, it's a bit of a repeat here. Is it possible without a specialized application?
I would say, I mean, I love the HR tech discussion, and probably that could be a whole separate webinar. But that's fascinating, what's coming up in this space and what we've seen over the last 1 to 3 years, ever since COVID, was a thing, what the world has brought up in terms of HR tech. Now, for the moment, if we start small, it's completely possible without a specialist application. At least the journey mapping in and of itself, any collaboration tool. I saw some people in the chat had the question, a Miro board is great, a whiteboard's great, Excel, Notion, whatever note-taking app you like, just to really map the space and collect the moments that you're creating for the journey, whatever is best for you. Managing that later is a different thing. So sorry.
Yeah, I'm gonna skip from this one, John, because we've kind of talked about tech a few times. Anything around like performance? Because there were a number of questions that came in on performance. Does journey mapping help the people team improve their overall team performance and the company performance?
1000%. And I think a lot of that we heard already, at least indirectly, with what John and Remy earlier said about first the value proposition that specifically an HR team is delivering on, but also to help a team to have even a first idea what an entire team is actually working on and understanding what happens at different parts of the journey. So from my experience, it's really about getting alignment in a people team or in an HR function. What is that we're working on? What it is my peers are working on, and how can we make sure it's it's consistent? And in a second step, also, I would definitely describe it as a way to at least indirectly impact company performance, because what the examples you gave earlier, Joris, around a return to work plan or a manager training for a first-time manager, all those things, if with a map, you're able to bring the right information to the right people at the right time, and you on top of that know that it has happened. So, and that's a very powerful way to really be a true enabling function, that the people team is a true enabler of the organization.
Yeah, and every single person I speak to who's created a journey map has had a very similar response, right? It's fascinating that not a lot of people have done it yet, but once a person, a team goes through the exercise, it's almost like, you know, it's a step change in terms of like strategic importance of HR, team performance, the connection between the different pillars within an HR team. All of that just like starts to work better. Another question on that. We probably get, maybe one or two more rapid questions in, Remy. So a very quick one. The business results. Have you, how do you build that connection between business results and something that is more HR related as it comes to journey mapping?
Yeah, I'm personally very fortunate at ADI that we have a CEO and an executive leadership team that already really values culture and sees it as a competitive differentiator in the market out there. But if you still struggle with that and you want to actually point out how important it is and what the impact is on business results, I would say simple way, just one example, is to look at the seats that are empty and measure the costs of that from a revenue perspective. For instance, 5 AEs rolls open and it takes you 90 days to fill, and they all carry a bag of X amount of million. That costs X amount of dollars. Like if you speed up the hiring with 1 month and you have less seats open, you can immediately measure what the impact is on the revenue, or how far you are behind. Or you could look at attrition. How much does it cost? Let's say first year attrition. First year, most of the people are not really adding that much value. How much does it cost then to exit the person? How much does it cost to hire the person? How much does it cost to ramp this person before they become effective? And you got a really important indicator of like how much business results you're making.
Great. And John, the final rapid question, and then we have to jump to a new section of the webinar to answer some more audience questions now. How do you present HR transformation roadmaps alongside journey maps? Was a question that came up, like related questions that came up a few times.
Yeah, I would just think of it sort of like as a double click on one of the spots on the map. So if you've got your big steps and there's something underneath one of the big steps that you want to work on, and that's going to require transformation, then you build out your project plan associated with that particular item. And it's a separate document that's really about the impact and the project management of that thing. So for example, let's say we need a new applicant tracking system because we've noticed that in that journey, that's part of the journey, there's a bunch of things missing and the software we have isn't going to be sufficient to ever provide for those issues. Then we need to go through some kind of HR transformation to get that new ATS. So if that's what the center about, so the project for that is now hanging off the map. And we know that part of the map's not going to get fixed until that's done. So it actually helps because you can say, I know that's broken. We're not going to run around with our tail trying to fix all the little things because we're trying to get this project done so we can fix the big thing, the underlying thing. So that's how I would use it together.
I'm going to skip through some of these additional questions just because of time and go through some of the audience questions because I think it's really nice to try to answer some of those here as well. The most upvotes had a question from Joy Doran on how do you keep the employee journey map alive? So Joy mentioned we found that people treated it as an interesting one-off document and then stopped like using it at some point. So how do you keep it alive? Is there anyone who's kind of got experience with that? John, you've you've run it for many months, so or many years.
There's two things I've done. One is I've actually physically put it up on the wall at one company. It was about a 150 person company, and it was a physical location where we had a lot of people, and I duplicated it for our other physical location. So we actually had it on the wall with some Post-its and pens and made it into an interactive, is there something you want to tell us? Notate the board. And so everybody started to realize, oh, wow, look, we have a journey. And that was really great, sort of like a subway map. Another way is just to make sure in my staff meetings, I use it as a monthly team building activity to go through it and talk about what's working, what's not, and use it as just a source of cross-functional interactions on the team. So they see it as a document I use as a regular basis to evaluate what we're doing.
I think, it becomes part of your quarterly planning process as well, right? So you
use it to report to management as well.
Yeah. So I think that what I've seen organizations using it as is literally just quarterly planning. You just put a journey map on and say, hey, this was our progress. Per Remy's point, there's more coverage across that journey because we've now covered first-time managers and live events and anniversaries and birthdays and parental leave and that type of stuff. Now can we move on to exit, or can we move on to pre-onboarding, right? So it becomes this a way for teams to kind of look across the entire journey, but then kind of look at it from a quarterly planning perspective as well. Neil Gunning asked a question. All of the moments in the journey map are considered key moments. Do you have a priority framework to allow you to build it out and focusing on the most impactful moments first? Anyone who wants to take that question?
I think I can start from the when we created the map and we looked at what we had in front of our eyes. I do think there's research, and now I might need help from Remy and John, and obviously Joris from you as well. I do think people psychologically, they definitely remember the beginning, the peak, and the end. So if you don't know where to start at all, I would say make the offer or the first day a great experience, and make the exit also a good one, because this tends to help people remember you. And if somewhere in between you can make one additional nice thing, and this is really up to your company culture, but what's important, maybe you have a big summer event every year, and that is then what you're making as an experience. I think this is a great place to start, but typically beginning and end and something, one peak moment, that's what I would see. If you haven't anything, that's where I would start.
As a, sorry, go ahead.
The other thing I would add to that, I think that's a great suggestion, would also be to look at what's most broken. That's why I said measure the KPIs as a baseline across the whole funnel. And then you very quickly, when I took on the people role at Data AI, we did not have any data. So I did not know what to focus on. I didn't know what was broken. So we started to measure the whole funnel, and it was very clear, oh, we got a big problem in recruitment. We're taking way too long to close roles. And that's where we started our focus on. The other angle is also, I think there's a lot of things that are table stakes. You will have to do those things. There is not even a choice. That's also a good baseline, I think, to start. An offer letter, or the first day getting the laptop. There's a couple of things that are, no matter what, they need to get delivered, otherwise the person cannot even get to work.
Of course, yeah. Just as a general note, and then we have to move on to the last section of the webinar with only a few minutes left. If you look at the journey map that we put together, and we'll send this to you afterwards, you can actually flick on the highest impact moments as well across the journey. So what we have, the map that I put together in Figma, this is just Figma, folks. You can kind of look at all these events, but maybe you don't start with relocation. You just start with the high impact moments first, which is something around anniversaries or something around birthdays, et cetera, et cetera. So if you want to have a peek there, feel free to have a look at that as well. Going back to the original presentation, I do want to take the last few minutes to go through one special announcement and some resources that we'll share. But as it relates to additional questions, and there's so many coming in, what we'll do is we'll take those questions and we what I'll do is I'll try to ask the panelists for one more favor to answer those questions for you, and put them on a resource that we can send out as well. So hopefully we'll still get those answers, those questions answered as good as possible. A few things to wrap up today's session. First of all, a special announcement that this journey map that you just saw in Figma, or the journey map that you saw John create at his previous companies, the problem with those journey maps is the starting process of that is just hard, right? Just to know what all the moments could potentially be, right? So what we're building at PIN is a journey mapping tool, basically a tool that allows you to go in, a free tool that allows you to go in and create your own journey map based on pre-populated moments that then of course can alter, etc., etc. So I do have a little poll question, as this is still in development. How excited would you be to have an employee journey framework like this? Just to kind of gauge the level of interest from the audience. So I'll give it 20 seconds. If you can do me a big favor as a founder, looking at product directions, the extent of excitement for something like that would be much, much appreciated. So I'll give it 10 more seconds to please dive into the little poll that you see on the screen. And then we'll close it off in 5 seconds. Thank you so much. Now what we'll do is we'll send out right after this webinar, or day after this webinar, the ability to sign up for an early access to this journey mapping tool. So you'll be the first ones to see it, to play with it, to give feedback. So if you're keen, please put in your email and submit it so we can send you that early access and collaborate with an audience that is hopefully already a little bit engaged, because otherwise you wouldn't be at this webinar in the first place, I would say. The second thing, as we're closing off, is a slight request there as well. You've just answered one poll question. There may be other poll questions. There may be other questions that we would like to ask. And we will send a quick request for some research, which is I think it's not even 7 minutes, like 5 minutes, just multiple choice questions, not a lot of open-ended questions, that we may send to this audience as well to fill in afterwards. But we'll also be sending you other stuff. We'll obviously send you the recording of this webinar. I'll send you the Figma that I created, where we kind of turn on and off the high impact moments. There's also a lot of resources available linking to our open library. So if you have a moment like putting together a return to work plan, there is content available on how to put together that return to work plan. It's very rich content there. We obviously, but as I mentioned, will provide early access to the online journey mapper. And I'll send you a blog post as well on the employee journey mapping process. And this journey, that blog post is actually based on interviews that I had with John in the earlier stages many months ago. And just the wealth of experience, John, that you have in that area is just spectacular. So have a read at that blog post if you're interested in taking that first plunge yourself.
And feel free to connect on LinkedIn too, because I'm happy to talk. I love this topic, so anytime. Yeah, please do. If you connect with all of us on LinkedIn, we're very active in this space. We'll probably post a lot more in this area. So connect with Felicitas, Remy, or John, or myself. Very much appreciated. But a massive thanks to the panelists, Felicitas, Remy, John. You're outstanding.
Thanks so much.
HR people, individuals. And it's been such a pleasure kind of having these preparation sessions with you to discuss this. We couldn't get through all the rapid questions, but we went through a fair few of them.
So folks, all the people attending, please join me in thanking the panelists, and we wish you an incredible rest of the day or end of the day, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joris. Thank you, Joris,
Thanks so
for
much,
hosting.
Joris. It's been so cool to be here. Thanks so much for the invitation.
Yeah.
No
Take care,
worries.
everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.